Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody. So thank you guys for coming to the upload template version 2.0 information sessions. So for you, those of you who don't know me, I'm Patrick LeClair. I'm a data specialist here with the Gordon Foundation. Judging by the names in this list, I've had a chance to meet all of you, most of you, but not all of you. So I'm glad you guys could all make it today. So just kind of a quick introduction to who we are, for those of you that don't know. The Gordon Foundation is a 55-year-old charitable organization based out of Toronto. We have two major programs. One is our Northern program, where we work with a lot of communities in Canada's north, as well as our water program. So the main kind of flagship initiative of our water program is DataStream, which is why you guys are all here today. Currently, we have our 3 hubs, Atlantic, Mackenzie, and Lake Winnipeg. And I think we have people actually representing maybe all 3 hubs here today. So that's really great to see. So just a quick overview as to what this presentation is going to look like this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at. We're going to first talk about why we went to version 2.0 and not 1.8. As those of you using the most up-to-date template, it's 1.7. We're going to talk a bit of our reason for making these changes. And then we're going to get into what these changes are. So we're kind of broken them into 2 sections. One is schema changes. So these are changes to allowed values and what columns are available. And then we're going to talk about template changes. So that's actually to the physical template. Then we'll finish off with a little demo. I'll show you guys what the new template looks like, how it works. We'll finish off with any questions you guys have. While you can save your questions to the end if you like, you can also ask them throughout. So either by putting them in the chat, or if you'd rather say them out loud, you can put your hand up and we'll unmute you. So whatever works for you. But yeah, let's get started. So first, why did we go with version 2.0 and not 1.8? So the big reason for a big version change like this is that we're making really big breaking changes to both the schema and the template. So these are large changes that we need people to really be aware of. The old template is going to, if you use it, it's going to kick back some errors that you're not going to be aware of. And so that's why we want people to really know that this is a major shift and that we want everybody to be moving in this direction. And this is not only both, with the schema, but the template is also, you guys will see, it's very different. The format of it is very different. And the hope is to make this a lot easier. We wanted to make a clear distinction between these 2 templates as well. So we wanted people who had these older templates to, when an error got kicked back, see that there was a template change and then know that that is what they need to do to fix some of their mistakes. So why are these big changes and why now? So one of the things is DataStream over the last number of years, we've been getting a lot of feedback from users, some of these through surveys on our website, but also through in-person meetings and surveys done at different events. And we really take this feedback and we do use it to guide the site. So the feedback from you guys is really important. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback we received was that people were finding the formatting process too difficult. It was a lot of work, it took too much time, and we totally understood that. And so we wanted to find a way to make it easier, and we felt that the best way to do this would be to modify our template. The next reason is that the WQX, which is the data model that we base DataStream off from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, they released a new version, 3.0. So they also had a big breaking change. And so we implemented some of those changes into DataStream, and we wanted then to have our own schema kind of jump up a stage to keep in pace with them. We also made a large change by adding some new data types. We'll talk about what exactly those are here in a bit, but that's kind of a big deal as well, and we wanted to make people aware of that. And we're also preparing for some new features and some DataStream growth. So DataStream is constantly growing. We're getting more and more groups and more data online, and we need to be prepared for that. And we're also looking at adding a bunch of new features. So we needed some way for the template and the schema to have the information we needed to add some of those new features. So what are these changes that we made? So I'll start with the schema ones. So these again are the ones to allowed values, columns, things like that. So as I mentioned, we added some new data types. So activity media name has had some significant changes. Here we added more options. So for those of you that are familiar with the DataStream template and format and have used DataStream before, you'll know that the only media name we accepted was surface water. And so, there was always lots of feedback is, can we add more data? Can we add more data types? And so we started with our first one, which is sediment. This one was done because it's really easy. The units were already in DataStream as well as a lot of the characteristics. So the two new data types we have are surface water sediment. And surface water sediment is any sediment that's kind of, on the bottom of a lake or a river or any kind of body of surface water. And then subsurface soil / sediment. So that's anytime you're doing some kind of a sediment core. So if you're taking a deeper soil or sediment sample and getting that monitored, you can now add that data to DataStream. We also added some other ones to be more granular with our data types. We found that surface water was the only one used, but there was other types of data that were being put under it that maybe wasn't the most correct. So for example, we added ambient air. So people were using temperature air and precipitation. That data is in DataStream. However, they were using surface water, which wasn't the most appropriate connection. So we added that. We also added pore water. So this is for anybody who's, again, if you're doing some kind of soil sampling, you're taking the water out of a soil core and measuring that. You can now add that data. And finally, ocean water. So we saw, being on the East Coast in the Atlantic data stream, a lot of groups are dealing not only with fresh water, but also salt water or marine environments. So we added ocean water so these groups could add their data as well. We also changed some of the required and conditional columns. This is something we have always tried to be careful about and cognizant that the more required columns we have, the more work it is for you guys. However, with the new template, we made it easier to do a lot of the work. So we felt comfortable adding some of these required columns that we have heard from our users would be really helpful. So two of the new required columns, one is result value type. So what this does is it differentiates, so this was actually in the old template, now it's required. It differentiates mostly between if your value is a calculated value or an actual value. So if you're just using a YSI, it's pretty straightforward. It will always be actual. But if you're getting lab data, you just need to talk to your lab to find out, was this calculated using two other values or was it its own unique measurement? And the other one is monitoring location ID. So before this was optional, groups could add it if they had it. However, with some of the new features we're doing and searching in our database, we needed these unique IDs. But furthermore, with the new template, and I'll show you what that looks like, these IDs are now used in the new template. So since we are using them and they're valuable now, we're making it required. So some other conditional columns, so columns that were previously not required, or sorry, that were all previously optional that now in some cases are required, are listed here. So one is method speciation. So method speciation is, is it as nitrogen or is it as phosphorus or is it as nitrate or nitrite? Again, this is for lab data. Previously, it was optional. However, with WQX and their new version, they added a new column for this, saying that it's required for some characteristics. So this works now the same as result sample fraction. So when you put in your characteristic name on the template, before result sample fraction would go red if it required a sample fraction. Now method speciation will go red if it requires a method speciation. So yeah, this is just for more robustness to get rid of some of the ambiguity. That's kind of the main thing with DataStream is we're trying to reduce ambiguity and make everybody on the same page and make your data as reusable as possible. So the next thing is result analytical method ID or name. So this is now conditional on activity type. And what that means is if you have lab data and it came from a lab, you need to include the method that the lab used. From a lot of our academic partners and science advisors, this is something that's really important. A lot of people want to be able to know what method was used and only want to compare like methods. So that's why we wanted to add this in so that people could add those methods. Labs will have all this information for you and should be able to provide it to you. So if you're just doing field data, however, if you're just using a YSI, that's not going to be needed for you. You don't need to include it for field data. Laboratory name, same kind of idea as result analytical method ID. If you're using a lab, please include the name of the lab. This allows people who are using your data to go back, ask the lab more information about their methods, but also more information maybe about your data if they have any questions. And then finally, result detection limit, measure unit and type. We found that there was some confusion between not detected and below detection limit. So we wanted to clear that up, and how we're doing that is so detected and, or sorry, not detected and detected not quantified are really just presence absence. Does it exist? Does it not exist? There's no limit measure there. We only want you to just say it's a yes or no. And then if you have above or below, you need to include those 3 types. Again, all of these changes are reflected in the template. So as you go through, you'll see that as well when you go to upload your data to DataStream. Once these new changes are made, you will get those errors back. And just to kind of clarify on that, once we finish the training sessions and information sessions this week, we're hoping to release all this next week. So there'll be another email that comes out, a listserv similar to what you guys got to let you know about these sessions, that will give you the new template and let you know that we've released it onto the site. So some other just kind of miscellaneous ones. We removed monitoring location water body. That was a column that was previously optional, so people could put it in if they wanted to or not. We found that, that just left some people using it, some people not, which made it not really helpful. And what we're hoping to do moving forward is actually have those auto-populated on our end. So when you upload your data, there'll be something that kind of adds that for you so that you won't have to do it yourself. And then finally, we added more allowed values to better align with WQX. So that ended up being close to another 1,000 different allowed value characteristics, as well as some more units as well. So that's all the schema changes. Again, the main ones were the activity media name and some columns now being required that weren't before. But this is kind of the major thing here is the template. So how is this going to affect you guys when you go to input your data? So the major thing that we did here is we added some additional tabs. So for those of you that are familiar with the template and have used it before, you'll know that there was one tab, the upload template tab, where you would put all of your data. So you'd put your data set name, your location name, and there's a lot of repetition here. Like you'd click and drag your data set name all the way down, and you'd click and drag your locations all the way down. And what we noticed is sometimes people, if they had a number in it, the number would in Excel, increase. And as that happened, there'd be incorrect data. This was also really, caused our users to have to do a whole bunch more work because now you had to put in, I think it was something like 36 different columns. In the new format, if you're using a YSI, when you go to put in your data, you actually only need to fill in 4 columns each time. So you're going from, having to do, I think with YSI data before, it was somewhere around 12. Now you just need to go down to doing 4. So we're hoping that this makes it a lot more streamlined. And again, we did this by adding these tabs. So the way these tabs work, the first one we added was the Dataset Metadata tab. So this tab is laid out similar to the metadata form. So any of you have filled out the metadata form with your data set, the Word document that breaks down each thing and what you need to put in it. We now have that as a tab in the data set. This is great because it draws that connection between your metadata and the data set on your own end. But we also use it now to populate the data set name for your data to be uploaded to DataStream. So you only have to put it in once now, and then it'll fill itself in. Monitoring locations. So now we have a page where you put all of your monitoring locations just once, and then this, again, cross-populates them over. So each location gets a unique ID, and then you just put, the name, location, the coordinates. You only have to do that once now, and then we use that ID to reference it over to fill in your information for upload. And then we did the same thing with characteristics. So instead of characteristics, you having to put in each time the characteristic name, the method speciation, the unit, the result sample fraction, the lab, all of that information, we automatically populate that for you by having you put that information in just once on the characteristic tab. So once these 3 tabs here with all of the kind of metadata related to your locations, characteristics, and data set are filled in, then all you do each time is you just fill in the results tab. So the results tab is just where you put information regarding the date and time that you recorded the data, maybe the depth, and what the value was at that site, and any comments. So you just put your results tab. You only have really one tab that you fill in each time. And then when you go to the export tab, it combines all of those previous tabs into the DataStream format. And then that's where you save it as a CSV. So this export tab replaces the upload template tab as your place for saving your data as a CSV. We also added a tips and tricks. So I think in the last one it was troubleshooting. We changed it to tips and tricks because it's not just troubleshooting advice. There's also some tips that kind of will make the process easier for you as well. We've also updated the instructions. So these instructions now reflect this new process. Like I said, you add the data to each metadata tab, and then we combine it all on export. And we also added in the instructions, there is a difference now between Mac and PC users. So unfortunately, the feature that we use to combine the data doesn't work on Mac currently. It is going to, hopefully in the next year, but right now it doesn't. So Mac users will have to use the template similar to the way they did before, which is just putting all your information into the export tab and saving it directly from there. They can also use the Google Sheet, which does the combination as well. So one of the big things to do to be able to do what we're doing is we started using Excel tables. So these are what are now used to store and cross-reference the data within the worksheet. So not only did it allow us to combine these data sets, but it also helps. You'll notice in the new template, there's only a couple of rows at the beginning that are filled in. As you go and add new data, the table will actually grow and grow. So instead of the whole thing being filled out, it's only the rows that you need. This helped us keep the size of the template down. We noticed with one of the previous iterations, if the template size gets too large, that some users were having trouble with it crashing. So we're hoping that this keeps the template size down and it makes it easier to use. So with that being said, I'm gonna go in now and show you guys a quick demo of what this looks like so you guys can get a better idea exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, awesome. So I'm just gonna switch the share here. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, so for the new template, this is it here. So, I mean, clearly, you can see off the hop, we did change some of the colors. Since we had to add new tabs, we wanted to kind of go with stuff that was easier to read. They're a little more muted now and not as bright as the other ones. You'll see all the new tabs at the bottom. We've also, as I mentioned, changed the instructions. We've got some information here about compatibility. So if you're running Windows 2010 or 2013, you just need to download this Power Query tool. It's free to download. It's from the Microsoft site, and it comes standard in all of their newer Excel. It's just the older ones that you need to download. If you're not sure which version you're running, you can just click here and these instructions will walk you through. Again, just kind of mentioned that the process is automated for PC users. However, if you're using a Mac, you'll just have to use it the same way you did before. And here's all the instructions. So as usual, I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. You can read through these when you get the template here next week. And there's the color codes. As you see, we changed some of them here in the legend. So the allowed values tab here. So this is where you can go and kind of see what new requirements we have. So, monitoring location IDs, one right off the hop, that's required now that wasn't before. You'll see these darker ones are required and then the lighter ones are the optional. And this is where you can find out all the new allowed values as well. Key one here being the activity media name, the new activity media names that we now allow. Glossary hasn't changed too much. Definitions are basically the same. Just kind of changed up the order here so you can see which ones are required. But now we're getting into kind of mostly the biggest aspect of the new stuff. So this is the Dataset Metadata tab. So as I mentioned, this is where you're going to go in and you're going to add your dataset metadata, and then you can just copy and paste it from here into the upload site. So instead, you can still use the Word document if you'd like. That will still be available, but you can also put it in here. The key thing is, however, you have to include your dataset name. because that's what's going to then be cross-populated over into the export tab. So you just got to make sure that that's filled in. Monitoring locations. So as you can see here, we've broken it down into these 6. So your ID has to be unique. So has to be unique identifier. So if I go test and I try to put test 1 twice, it's going to kick back an error and say it has to be unique, and they're going to be red. So just make sure that you have a unique ID. You put your name in, your latitude, kind of longitude. So similar to before, but now you only have to do this once. So you just put it in here, and then these 5 columns only get inputted on this one tab. So next we go over to our characteristic metadata. So this is where we can put our characteristic ID. It can be a variety of things. It could be a number. It could be maybe a short form that your group uses. It could be something from your lab. So you just kind of put in your ID. And then this is where you put your activity type. So is it a lab or a field sample? Your activity media name is now decided. And then this is the characteristic name is where you're going to put your data stream name. So you fill in all of this characteristic metadata information. And then these 3 are filled out the first time you use it. So you fill those 3 out and then you save it. And then every time then when you want to add new data, you just add it to this results tab. So on this results tab, you have a drop down here where you can choose your monitoring location ID. It gets this information from this ID. So those are your options. Then you can pick your characteristic ID. And then all you have to do now is just put in your date and your result value. And then you come to export. You just hit right click, hit refresh, and it'll combine all of the data for you. So I know that's a lot. I'm going to actually go through, I have a kind of a sample one put together so we can kind of walk through what that process looks like so you can really see how it works. So from here, you have your dataset metadata page. So as I mentioned, this is similar to the metadata form we currently have. It's the exact same categories. The red ones are the required and the other ones are optional. So the main thing here is you just need to put your dataset name up here, and then that's what we'll use to populate it on the export tab. Monitoring locations. So this tab is where you put all your monitoring location ID. So again, this only needs to be put once. You just need to make sure that you have a unique identifier. So if I have tests, test site 1, I can't then go test 1 again here. If I do, it'll kick back an error for me saying that must be unique, and then it'll go red. So I've got to make sure that this is test 2, and then this becomes test site 2. So now, instead of you having to do this each time, you're only going to put this in once and store all of your unique locations and IDs on this tab. So once you fill this out, then for the first time, then you can just save it and keep it. Next, you'll fill out the characteristic ID. So again, this is where you can put in, it could be numbers, or it could be some kind of shorthand that maybe your organization uses. Again, these all have to be unique as well. And then the columns are the same as before. You'll see the red ones are mandatory, the yellow ones are optional. Put in the data stream name here. And then this is where your result value type goes, and this is where you decide, is it actual, calculated, or estimated, blank corrected, or control adjusted as well, or some other lab options. Put your unit. So you'll also notice that if I go to field, and then I go over to method ID, context name, and lab, those all go green because you're not going to have a method ID in a lab because it's a field measurement. However, if I do use sample routine, just for labs, and you come over to the right, these will all turn red because they're all now mandatory. So that's, as I mentioned before, that's that conditionality between the activity type and these columns. So you fill everything in here. Again, you only do this once, so characteristic ID. And then once these 2 are filled out, you just can save it. And now all you have to do is each time you get your data, your results or your observations, you just put them into the results tab. So here, if I have just random characteristic ID, you just choose your monitoring location ID. So I think I deleted this one. Yeah, so I'll just keep this here, test 1. So this is where you can just choose your location ID, choose your characteristic ID, and then all you have to do now is just put in your date and your result value, and then you come to export, you just hit right click, hit refresh, and it'll combine all of the data for you. So I know that's a lot. I'm gonna actually go through, I have a kind of a sample one put together so we can kind of walk through what that process looks like so you can really see how it works. You'll see on the dataset metadata page, I've got this dataset name, test dataset for inspo sessions. I've got my monitoring locations all filled out. So my IDs, names, latitude, longitude, this is all filled out here once. Then for characteristic metadata, same thing. I've got these characteristic IDs. I've got a combination of, these are the ones actually that the lab sends me, or is sent from the example I used. And then these bottom ones are maybe, shorthands that my organization uses. So I've got this all filled out. So that's all filled out here once. Now all I have to do is add my results. So to add my results, I'm gonna use an example here from this lab sheet. So lab sheet from a lab called ALS, pretty popular lab, but you can use whichever lab sheet you get. So for example, I can just copy in my parameters. Make sure when you copy stuff in, you right click and go to values. If you don't do that, it'll delete the formatting. So make sure when you do this, you right click and then go to values. So that's all in here. I want to add my location. So let's say we go to test site 2, put those in. Again, clicking values. I'll put in my date, time, and then I'll come over here to my result value. Oops, yeah, result value. So I'll put my values in. You'll see that these ones went to red. That's because they are below detection limit. So I just need to change this to below detection limit. And then delete these. So that goes to green. So we're good to go. Result status ID is optional. That's just, and more of a QA/QC thing. If you use it, it's for if it's accepted, if it's publishable, if it's rejected. Here's where you can put your comment, any analysis, start date, start time, if your lab provides that. And then finally, your sample ID, if your lab gives you one of those as well. In this case, we do have one. So I'll just put that in here. So once all this result information has been put in and my other metadata tabs are all filled out, I go over to the export tab, export, and then I go up here, I right click, I hit refresh. And then now that it's refreshed, it's got all of the data that I just inputted, and now it's put it all into the DataStream format. So now it's all good, ready to go. I go save as, save it as a CSV file, and then upload it to DataStream. And then now what I do is next time I come along, I want to do an addition, let's say, to DataStream. I will just delete my old information. And then this time, let's say instead I want to do this kind of way, I can right click, hit transpose. So it'll put all my my locations there. I just want to do nitrate, let's say. So I just copy my nitrate in. Activity start date is all the same. One thing to be careful with, however, anybody who's used DataStream, dates can be a bit of a problem. So if you right click and you transpose your dates, they're going to be in the wrong format. So what you need to do instead is transpose them down here and then copy them up here as a value. And then it'll put them into the right format for you. Same with my start times. You got to do the same thing. Dates and times are a pain. Excel is not great at dealing with them. So transpose and then copy, put them up here as values. So those are good to go. Then we come over, copy my result value. So I was just looking at nitrite. So I'll just put these in, transpose them. Again, these are red, so I need to make sure that they're below the detection limit. So below. And then finally, I have my lab ID. So I copy my laboratory sample ID in here. I transpose that. And then finally, I go over to export. I right click, I hit refresh. And now it's got all of that new data here. So I've got all my locations, my data set name's been filled in. All of the information about those characteristics has now been filled in. So the method speciation, the sample fraction, Result values are all in here. Result value type. My detection limits, I can double check. I can say, okay, below 0.071. Yeah, that's what it said over here. So that's all good to go. And yeah, and then I can just save it as a CSV and then export it to DataStream. So that's the overview of how the new Excel template works. We'll go over just really quickly about the Google template. It's really similar. There's just one little change. So I'll pull that up now. So this is the Excel, this is the Google Sheet. So the Google Sheet works the exact same, where you have these different tabs at the bottom. You put in your information into each tab. The difference, however, with Excel is when you go to export, instead of, there we go. Instead of right-clicking and hitting refresh, you just need to open the tab and it'll actually pull all the information over for you. So if I go into my results here and I put in my monitor and location ID and my characteristic ID, a value. Now when I go over to my export tab, that information is all filled in. So in the Excel one, you don't need to use the refresh feature. It'll automatically fill in everything for you. So that's a way as a Mac user, if you do want this feature of the combination, you can use the Google Sheet instead. That might make it a bit easier. So with that being said, that's kind of the end of the demo. That's the two new templates. Again, this is all based on feedback from you guys. We really wanted to make this process more streamlined and easier. So again, once we release it next week and you have a chance to play around with it, any feedback we'd greatly appreciate. We want to make sure that this is easier for you and does make the process more streamlined and more helpful. But for right now, if you guys have any questions, yeah, for sure. Okay, sweet. So one question was, in terms of the drop-down menus, how do we get them to keep going down? So that's a great thing with the new feature we're using with these tables, is it automatically builds those down themselves. So for example, if I come into this results tab, if I just put some new information into this blank one, it'll actually bring down and create the new cell for me. So if I put in a new date down here, it'll just continually keep building this down and down. Same with your characteristics. But it's the same too as if I copy and paste. So if I copy and paste a whole bunch of information, let's say I copy and paste all of this into my characteristic IDs, I just paste these in, it's going to build that down for me. And it'll copy all of the drop-down menus and all the formatting. So it'll build itself as we go. Again, this was to make it smaller so that you didn't have to have the whole document formatted at once. So yeah, so that'll build. And then on the Excel template, the difference here is you just have to add columns. So you just add new rows as you go. And then, or if you copy and paste in, it'll add those new rows automatically for you. So yeah, so it'll build and it'll add those drop downs for you. So you don't have to copy and paste each time. Just make sure that it touches it's the next row. You can't have any blank rows in between or else it won't copy that over. Yeah, if there's any other questions right now. I mean, I think once you guys get a chance to play around with it, there probably will be some questions. As always, I'm here to answer any of them. So if you do, when we send this out next week, run into any issues, find it hard to use, find something not working the way it's supposed to be or the way you think it should be working, yeah, I will definitely be here to help you. So we just wanted to make sure we ran this first, just so people weren't going blankly into this. I think that there is quite a bit of a change, and we just wanted to give people at least a basis to know where to start from. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for coming to today's session. Again, we're going to be releasing this template next week. If you didn't get an email regarding these information sessions and you want an email moving forward on any technical changes, so any new templates or any new processes we have, send me an email and I can add you to the listserv, so you will be on this. But you can also subscribe to our newsletter here if you'd like. This won't give you technical updates. It's more program stuff of what we're up to. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. It's a great spot to find, kind of what we're up to. And feel free to email us at the DataStream at Gordon Foundation, or my personal email, which is patrick@gordonfn.org. Another thing that we've been doing the last few months as well that you might be interested in is we have been doing an open office hours. So what this is the first Wednesday of every month. Myself, Lindsay Day, our program manager, and Will Farrell, our software developer, have a Zoom link where you can go, and we just sit there for an hour and answer any and all questions you have. It can be an issue you have with the template. It can be maybe you want to know more about the inner workings of DataStream. We're happy to answer any and all of those questions. So our next one's August 5th, and we do them again the first Wednesday of every month. There's a link here at the bottom. If you go to that link, it'll allow you actually to register, and you'll get updates of when those are happening every month, so you can keep track of those. We also post the updates from them on our YouTube channel. As well, on our YouTube channel right now, we also have recordings of the webinars we've been doing the last few months. If people are interested in checking those, our Dive into Data series. We did one on just data management best practices, another on just an online training session. However, it's a little outdated now because we moved forward to this one. So we're going to replace it with this training session. And then finally, we did one with the US EPA on the WQX model. We're hoping to have a few more webinars in the fall on QA/QC practices, as well as some Excel tips and tricks. So keep your eyes posted for those as well. So like I said, thanks everyone for coming. Keep your eyes peeled to your email. We're going to be sending out these new templates here next week, hopefully by Wednesday. And yeah, hopefully this will help make the process the rest of the summer and into the fall easier for you guys to get your data online. So thanks again, and we'll hopefully be hearing from you soon.